At 52 years old, a man from Somerville, Massachusetts ran 155 miles across the Gobi Desert. 6 days, self-supported, through Mongolia, he won it. That same year, he won the Masters Marathon World Championship in Chicago, which makes him the fastest marathoner on the planet over the age of 50. 15 years earlier, that same man was a decade deep into an opioid addiction. That's Everything You Want is on the Other Side of Hard, a memoir by Ken Rideout. But to understand how a 52-year-old wins a world title, you have to go back to Somerville, Massachusetts. Rideout grew up in working-class Somerville, north of Boston, long before the address got expensive. His first career was as a corrections officer inside a Massachusetts prison. From there, he went to Wall Street, Cantor Fitzgerald, then Credit Agricole. By every external measure, it worked. He made the money, he built a career. He was also, for about a decade, addicted to opioids. Through the job, through the success, through all of it. Getting clean came later, and what he put in its place was an endurance sport. More than 10 Ironman triathlons, at 52 the Masters Marathon World Championship, and that same year the aforementioned Gobi March across Mongolia. That's the shape of this story. The interesting part is the mechanism. So what happens when someone wired like that stops? What happens when they stop with the drugs? There's no single addictive personality, but impulsivity and sensation seeking show up as consistently, and twin studies put genetic factors at 40 to 60% of addiction risk. What comes next in recovery is called transfer addiction. The compulsion doesn't vanish, it sort of relocates. And compulsive exercise is one of the most common places it lands because exercise is a socially acceptable addiction. Nobody stages an intervention over a training block. Among endurance athletes, the rate climbs with race distance. And yet exercise is also one of the most effective tools in recovery. Both things are true at once. The last piece of context that you need for this book, because marathon and ultramarathon are not the same category. A marathon is 26.2 miles, and the ceiling on it just moved. This past April at the London Marathon, Sebastian Saw of Kenya ran 1:59:30. The first sub-2 hour marathon ever run in a record-eligible race. 4 minutes and 33 seconds per mile held for 26 straight miles. Beyond that is an ultra. Anything longer is than 26.2 miles. The most famous one being the Badwater 135, 135 miles through the Death Valley in mid-July, from the lowest point in North America up to 8,000 feet on Mount Whitney, in ground temperatures that hit 135 degrees. But 85 to 90% of the field finishes Badwater. The genuinely hardest race on the earth is the Barkley Marathons in Tennessee. 5 loops, up to 135 miles, 63,000 feet of climbing, more than twice the height of Everett, no aid stations, no GPS, map and compass only. In 40 years, exactly 20 people have ever finished it. The last 2 editions ended with nobody finishing at all. The best on the planet, perhaps, are Kilian Jornet and Courtney Dauwalter. In one summer, Dauwalter won the Western States, Hard Rock, and UTMB, the 3 biggest 100-milers in the sport. That's the world Rideout's Gobi March sits in. 155 miles across the Mongolia, 6 stages in 7 days, self-supported, carrying your own food and gear the entire week. He won it at 52, 15 years after getting clean. And the sport is exploding. In 2000, roughly 80,000 ultra runners in the United States. By 8,000 ultra runners in the United States. By 2024, there were nearly 87,000. So that is the backdrop for this book, Everything You Want is on the Other Side of Hard. I personally did not know who Ken Rideout was prior to reading it. Now, I had just briefly heard of him because I follow and really enjoy Cam Hanes' content, and he was on Cam Hanes' podcast. So I figured I would read his book because I do like memoirs. The book itself is his story. It's everything that I just talked about, right? It comes from his rough times growing up. He comes from a very poor background. Family life was really rough. He kind of glosses over that, which, by the way, is a bit of a theme in this book, which I'll talk a little bit more about. But he was, a lot of violence growing up, very unstable family. There were drugs all around him. He just, like kids that grow up in poor rural America, That's what Ken Rideout came up in, and sports became a bit of an escape for him. And that's what, in my mind, kind of led to this sort of like exercise obsession that he has. But it talks about his story going into Wall Street. I mean, this guy ends up having a very successful career in finance. I mean, he again kind of glosses over the fact that, he was at the elite in the 1% of the world, right? I mean, he was traveling all around. This guy could pretty much do anything he wanted from a financial standpoint. And he was, very successful at that. But all throughout, he has these opioid addictions. And that becomes obviously a central theme of this book. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, and part of this is just my opinion, I think addictive personality is not something that can be cured. As someone who has some of this experience myself, I think you transfer it to healthier places. People that are obsessive, like me, we have to obsess over good things. And if you put that into exercise, that can be a good thing. Something I obsessed over many years ago was reading. I set a goal of reading 100 books a year back in 2016, and I've done it every year since then, or more. And that is an obsession, and I fully admit that. But to me, it's not a negative obsession. It's better than drugs or alcohol. You got to put that stuff in the right place, and I do think that this book is a good example of that. The criticism that I will have of this book, and this is, I think a lot of books for me, as someone who's read a lot, they have to hit you at the right time in your life. If I had read this type of a book when I was young, single, and full of testosterone, this would have really fired me up to go and do things. But when you're older and you have a family, you're married, you have kids, you realize that life is not about balance, but it's about sacrifice. And this is my personal opinion, and I will critique him on this, is that you cannot possibly be a good husband and a good father if you have 4 kids and you're off doing all of these pursuits. He does touch on this in the book. Again, it kind of like it's glossed over, and in some ways, I don't know, there were parts of it that I just didn't like in that respect. For example, I just don't like or love the idea that you can, if you just put your mind to a goal and set this audacious goal, you can go do it. Okay, but you're sacrificing other things, and he's choosing to sacrifice family. That is a decision that he made. Cool, we need to acknowledge that. You cannot be, this is a lifestyle, right? To win ultra marathons, it is absolutely a lifestyle, and it comes at a cost. And for many people, it is family. It is being a good husband, a good father in this example. I think of this like Elon Musk. I've reviewed books of his on my channel here. Elon Musk is not a role model when it comes to a family man, but he's an incredible technologist and an incredible entrepreneur. This guy, Ken Rideout, achieves crazy things, but he sacrifices his family, and we just have to acknowledge that. And that's my critique, and that's the reminder that I say to myself when I think of because as someone who was training to run a marathon years ago, you could go run and do crazy things, but you are going to sacrifice other things. And that was always a reminder, and it's something I try to remind myself as I get older when I read books like this, is because it's often this like, you can achieve anything, you can do these crazy pursuits, yes, but if you're not young and single, this is an extremely selfish lifestyle. And even if you are young and single, it's still a selfish lifestyle. It's just healthy for you, probably physically and mentally. So that's the book. Everything You Want is on the Other Side of Hard. I would say generally good book, just parts of it that I didn't find likable, but it's still a crazy story. And there's a lot of parts in this book that I think would resonate with people, like former addicts, like people that are into the ultras, like people that are trying to turn their life around. There's something in this for everyone. So certainly one that I would recommend reading. It's a memoir by Ken Rideout. I appreciate you watching. Thanks.